going to let people get into the room. Very excited for the celebration of Misty Copeland's book tonight, Bunheads. Gorgeous cover. I love the back too. Bunheads. Well, we're looking forward to our conversation. All right, we'll get started now. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to P&P Live. My name is Margaret Orto, and I'm the events coordinator in the Children and Teens Department at Politics and Prose. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for a conversation with Misty Copeland, along with Jocelyn Noveck, to celebrate the publication of Bunheads. Just a few housekeeping items before introductions. Tonight, we're going to be dropping the book purchase link for Bunheads into the chat down below during the conversation. So you can order books tonight during the event or always from our store, either online or in person. I do want to show up the gorgeous cover again. Here's the book. And we do tonight have, along with purchase, we have signed book plates with the purchase while the supplies last. This evening, you can ask a question by clicking Q&A located at the bottom of your screen. You can also upvote on a question that you'd like to see answered. And at the end, or during the conversation, or at the end of the conversation, we'll definitely be getting to these audience questions as well as the conversations between Jocelyn and Misty. As always, please remember, this is a creative, safe space, and we ask that attendees be respectful of one another in any questions and comments. Now, on to introductions. Misty Copeland made history in 2015 when she was the first Black woman to be promoted to principal dancer at American Ballet Theatre, one of the most prominent classical ballet companies in the world. She is the author of the award-winning picture book, Firebird. Bunheads is her second children's book and has just been released this week. We are delighted that she is joined in conversation with Jocelyn Noveck, a longtime culture writer at the Associated Press. Along with the arts, she also frequently covers gender issues, including women in politics and the Me Too movement. She is a former correspondent in Paris and Jerusalem. And now I'd like to turn it over to Misty and Jocelyn. Please take it away.
Thank you, Margaret. Hi, Misty.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So good to see you again.
Me too.
I wanted to just start right off with such beautiful artwork in this book. And I didn't want to forget, before we get into the story, just to ask you a little bit about the artwork. I assume that you were involved in choosing it. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah. You know, clearly with a picture book, I feel that the artwork is, you know, equally as important as the dialogue and the writing and the words. So yes, I came up with this concept loosely with my husband about 5 years ago for the story of Bunheads, that we really saw as a series, like the possibilities of it being a series and just all of the amazing characters and kids that exist in dance that we could really showcase. But already having really accomplished the story, I was then presented with a list of artists, and Setor Fiagibe, who is the artist, illustrator for Bunheads, was so different from everyone that I was shown. I think he was one of the few that didn't have any works of dancers that he drew. And a lot of it was kind of, looked like it was geared more towards boys, kind of in a comic book genre, and a lot of them were like superheroes. And to me, I was like, oh, he's got it. Dancers and ballet dancers are superheroes. And I think that's how kids feel watching professional dancers, you know, watching the men jump and fly and defy gravity, and just the women who look so ethereal. And so to me, it was the perfect fit. So he exceeded my expectations. You know, you don't even have to be able to read or read the words to understand how vivid and clear his drawings and illustrations are. I'm so pleased with it.
I love the way he captures you as a little girl. There's something so recognizable about you.
Yeah.
So let's start with something really obvious, but I think maybe kids know this more. What is a bunhead?
A bunhead, you know, when I was younger and people would call me a bunhead, I would kind of get offended, like, you know, trying to deny the fact that I just could not take this bun out of my head because I loved ballet so much. But that's really what it is. But it's a term of endearment. I think when I was younger, I thought like, oh, well, then I'm seen as like nerdy and all I want to do is ballet. But that's all I did want to do. And it's okay. And I think it's a beautiful thing. You know, I live on the Upper West Side, and you can spot a group of bunheads from a mile away walking, you know, towards Lincoln Center or Steps on Broadway. But, you know, I just wanted to be able to showcase something that dancers could really connect with, and kind of like, you know, a lot of things that we don't get to see in mainstream media and in television, you know, which a lot of it is such negativity when it comes to classical dance and movies and in media. So I wanted to be able to bring some light and joy to us.
Yeah, well, you're referring to movies. I mean, Black Swan is sort of the obvious. That's no reality in that, right? Would you say?
Not my reality, anyways.
So the story, it seems to be a number of themes here. There's a theme of confidence. There's a theme of camaraderie. So maybe let's just talk a little bit about the characters in the book. Your best friend, Catalina, is in this book. So why don't we start with her? Tell me a little bit about her.
Yeah. You know, well, first, I really just wanted to be able to showcase the beautiful relationships that are formed for so many who come into the dance world as a young person and as a professional. You know, this kind of common thing that you share, this love of dance, and you know, being in a ballet studio or being on a stage is so intimate, and it's such a vulnerable position for a young person especially to be in. I mean, we are literally naked, we're in a leotard and tights, and it's a place that you really learn to trust the people around you. And so that was something I had no experience with as a young person. There was a lot of mistrust in my life, you know, growing up the way that I did. So Catalina, when I entered the ballet studio the first time, my first day in San Pedro at the San Pedro Dance Center, this little chubby Mexican girl walks up to me, and I knew she was younger than me, but I looked really young for my age. But she comes to me and she just looked at me and said, "Oh, how old are you?" And I remember feeling a little offended, like, "Oh, I'm clearly older than you." So I was like, "I'm 13." And it was like from then on that we just like connected. Like we were very different, and I think that's the beauty in having so like allowing for every child to be able to see that it is a possibility for them to be a part of dance, and then being exposed to different people with different experiences and different cultures and coming from different communities. And that's what I found in Catalina. She was kind of just the opposite of me, and I grew and learned so much from her friendship and support, and that's what we show in the book.
So you would say you were not a confident child?
No, I was beyond introverted. You know, I think that I was successful in school because I was capable and able of memorizing. Like I had a very visual like ability to learn things visually, and that served me really well in dance. But I was so introverted that I feel like it blocked me from learning, from progressing as a human being. And it wasn't until I came into dance that I found this inner confidence, because I felt comfortable and I felt safe in that very vulnerable environment.
let's paint the picture a little bit of because this is the character Misty, the young character Misty, and her experiences are not exactly your experiences, but they're inspired by your experiences. But the young character Misty is really going to her first ballet class in this book. And that's where, and she's never done it before at all. And there's this teacher, Miss Bradley, and I guess initially Misty is very nervous that she can't do anything, but Miss Bradley obviously sees something in her and connects with her. And that did happen with you.
Yes, yes. I was very fortunate that my ballet teacher was already, you know, before meeting me, investing in communities that don't have the access and don't have the means to be a part of the ballet world. You know, which is how she found me at a Boys and Girls Club on a basketball court. But it was her faith and belief in me that she's the reason that I'm here today. It was the first time that, you know, I really trusted an adult in my life, and that kind of lifted me up and empowered me to step outside of my comfort zone and push myself. And I'm just forever grateful for that relationship that I had with her, which is such a big part of the book, showing the relationship me and Kat have with Miss Bradley, and that we have with each other, and how important that is in a young person's life.
We were talking earlier about this book, and you told me the story again that I had read a long time ago, but I think it bears repeating about how that moment when you were 13 and you wanted to dance, but it wasn't working with your family, and the demands on your mother, and you had to tell Miss Bradley that you were going to quit, that you couldn't go on. Can you tell us what happened?
Yeah. It was such an interesting time in my life. You know, I was kind of caught between these two worlds where, you know, before ballet, BB, I was extremely just kind of, I lived in this shell of trying to protect myself in any way possible, because I think I was a very fragile person on the inside. There was just constant chaos and moving and, you know, abuse and just so much going on. And then I find ballet, and it's the complete opposite. And it's the first time I feel safe. And then having Cynthia come into my life, I finally felt like I was starting to blossom. But my mother had 5 other children, and she, you know, what she needed to do for us was keep us off the street and in school and food on the table. So ballet was kind of the farthest thing from a priority with my family. So my mom decided, you know, it was just too much to find a ride for me to get back and forth to ballet class. And I was not living in the city where I was going to school and going to ballet. It was quite a ways away. And at the time, my family was living in a motel, which nobody knew about. That was something that I really kept private, because it was, you know, I felt a lot of shame around it as a young person. But that day that I had to express to Cynthia that my mom said I had to stop dancing because it was just too much for her with 5 other children. You know, Cynthia said, well, the least I can do is drive you home. And I was just dying inside, having to tell her the address for the motel. And when she pulled up to drop me off, you know, she was just stunned by it. And I ran out of the car, and it was kind of like, well, that's the end of that small, short chapter that I had in my life. And I think it was about 15 minutes later, there was a knock on the door, and my mom answered, and Cindy had come back to the motel. And at the time, I couldn't hear what they were saying. I was sitting on the floor, as I did with my siblings. There was only one room. And my mother turned around and said, Cindy asked if you would live with her, move in with her and train. And it was such a huge moment and turning point for my whole life. And I literally picked up my backpack and put the few things I had in there. And I left and moved in with Cynthia that night. And here I am today.
I can only imagine how she felt in 2015 when you became principal dancer.
Oh, I know. I know.
So this is your second children's book.
Yes.
And you've also written a memoir. And this is not going to be, you're not only going to have two, you're planning a whole series of these.
Yes.
So why not, I'm just curious, what was it that made you first feel drawn to A, writing a book at all, and B, writing for kids?
Writing was something that I was drawn to even before dance. I mean, before I stepped into a ballet studio. I, again, was so shy and I didn't know how to express myself, and I definitely wasn't going to do that through speaking at all. So writing became something that I did. I started journaling from a young age, and of course the escape of reading. Really picture books as well. I mean, I think again, I was drawn to visual art and connected so much in that way from a young age. But it was just really cathartic for me, you know, stepping into writing a memoir and be able to use all of those journals that I still own to this day, that I've been writing in for most of my life. But, you know, my first picture book with Christopher Myers, Firebird, I think really opened up something inside of me that I didn't realize, you know, was there, which is, I think, an ability to really connect with a younger audience, which we do as dancers anyways. You know, kids are visual learners, and I think that's the beauty in coming to see a visual art form like ballet. But then, you know, that's why it's so important for me with picking an illustrator or collaborating with an illustrator, is that the images should be able to stand on their own and tell a story in that way. And I think that's something that I've always found powerful and connected with myself.
And I see the chat is starting to blossom. So we're going to go there soon. But I did want to ask you, since you mentioned that there are going to be sequels, what are you going to explore in these sequels to this book?
Yeah, thank you for asking me that. I haven't really been asked that question much since the book came out. It's so exciting because there's so many characters that I want to be able to release into the world that will represent so many people from so many different communities and walks of life, and to really give, you know, allow for this kind of freedom for everyone to see themselves represented. So it was exciting having Cindy, in real life, my teacher, her young son, who I moved in with when he was only 3 years old, Wolfie, he's in the book. And I found it really important to have a male, like a boy character in this ballet book. So with the next book, I'm going to be, Catalina will really be more of the focus of it, and her experience, and a little more about her culture as a Mexican girl. And we'll introduce another friend of mine who is Lebanese, Persian, and Cuban. But I eventually want to introduce more boys. There's 2 boys that dance at American Ballet Theatre School, the Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis School, then went into the studio company and now dance at Houston Ballet and all over the world. 2 Black Muslim boys from Brooklyn, New York, who ended up in the ballet world, you know, I think initially against their parents', you know, wishes, but there's so many people that dance, and, you know, we're so often just kind of put into this box of what a dancer should be. And I want to show the world all that we can be and include everyone.
Let's get to that also again a little bit later, because I want to talk to you more broadly about what's going on in the dance world and how it's being impacted by some of these forces that are roiling, you know, in our world right now. Let me just see what we got here. So Eliza wants to know, were you ever a soldier in the Nutcracker? And were you ever a peppermint? I guess that's a candy cane.
Yeah. I was not. I think because I started so late, I kind of skipped a lot of steps. My very first Nutcracker, I played Clara, and my second Nutcracker, I was Sugar Plum Fairy. So I had a really quick rise, but I've played so many different roles. You know, at American Ballet Theatre, I was a doll. I was in the snow. I was a Merliton. They call them sisters in Alexia Montesi's version. I was a Spanish. Yeah, so I've done a lot of roles in the Nutcracker.
I'm going to take a nanosecond to tell you that actually I was a soldier in the Nutcracker.
I love it.
So at the New York City Ballet. Denora wants to know, she wants to know that, first of all, that she really likes you, and she wants to know, what is your favorite dance to perform?
Thank you. My favorite ballet and role to perform, it would definitely be Juliet and Romeo and Juliet. I'm just really drawn to those really rich, dramatic acting roles, especially at this point in my life. It's my favorite to do.
So since you mentioned Juliet, you just did a really cool thing this week. It was a sort of a master class in a way with Alessandra Ferri, the great
yes
of years past at ABT. I think she even performed it again when she was over 50. Is that correct?
Yes. So she actually coached me on my very first time around doing it. And then when I went to La Scala and performed it with Roberto Bolle, she actually, I think it was her first time kind of back doing the role as well. So we were like switching nights. I was like, how is this my world right now? I went from looking up to this unbelievable ballerina, being coached by her, to now like sharing the role at La Scala as she danced with Herman Cornejo, one of my partners. Unbelievable experience, just a fountain of knowledge that is endless. And I learned even more from that little bit of the city center. I'm like, did I forget about it, or is this new information she's giving me?
That is really interesting, because I think it sort of speaks to how, and I don't know that everybody knows this. I mean, you perform roles again and again and again. Mm-hmm. As a ballerina, and you know, whether it's Sleeping Beauty, Swan Lake, Coppélia, which is by the way the ballet focused on in your children's book, or Romeo and Juliet, and you do it over and over again, and people I think it's sort of the same because the choreography is. But I have heard you say that it's always different, right? Every
yes. Time. Yeah, there's no phoning it in. When you're doing something that takes so much preparation, even if you've done the same, the same version, that's the same choreography for years and years and years, you still have to prep your body again. It's a different way of moving from another ballet or another choreographer. So there's that first, but then approaching the role when you're in a different place in your life, you have had new experiences. It just makes everything so different with the way that you interpret it. So as well as I think I want it to feel different. And so that's something that I'm conscious of whenever I approach doing a role that I've performed before. But it truly innately is a different experience every time that I go on the stage to do a role, even if it's like back-to-back nights. That's I think an exciting thing about being a human being, is that you wake up and you're in a completely different space and place in every way than you were the day before.
Well, now that leads to something that we haven't talked about yet, but is pretty obvious and striking, which is that you haven't been able to be on the stage, and neither has anybody, actors in theater, anybody who performs live, has had to find new ways of surviving and creating, and just staying ready for when this pandemic will allow people to perform again. So why don't we I'd like to ask you what you've been doing during the pandemic, and sort of what your hopes are for once this terrible time ends.
Yeah. It's been very unusual for me because I was injured right before going into quarantine. Well, maybe a month or so before, and ended up having a small procedure. It wasn't anything really serious, but I've been really taking this time to heal. So it hasn't been as odd to me because I haven't needed to dance, because I've just been resting my body, which quarantine fits well with resting. So, but you know, in that time, I've been able to, you know, connect with, of course, all of my friends all over the globe, all over the world, and in ABT, and just witnessing, you know, just the devastation with theaters being closed. There's no way for us to earn money. Without ticket sales. The dancers can't get paid, and not just the dancers, but everyone that's connected, and what keeps these ballet companies afloat and going. So, you know, it's been difficult. You know, I've watched and witnessed friends of mine have to get rid of their apartments because they can't afford it anymore, or not, you know, struggling to put food on the table. And you know, dancers at ABT that are foreign and from other countries can't go home. They, a lot of them can't collect unemployment. And so it's been really difficult, which is, you know, why I wanted to start Swans for Relief, the GoFundMe. You know, to get efforts to dancers all over the globe for their COVID relief funds and their companies. So I've just been trying to use my platform and my reach and my voice as best I can to help the dance community right now.
That was beautiful. If people haven't seen it, I would really recommend it. This incredible, stunning performance of What the Dying Swan.
Yeah.
How many ballerinas was this?
Yeah, so 32 of my ballerina sisters from all over the world, from 22 different professional companies and from 14 different countries.
And the GoFundMe is still live.
Yes.
Still out.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Great.
Swans for Relief GoFundMe. Yeah.
Now let's see what else. A lot of Nutcracker questions. So Vanessa says that she adores that you made a children's book, especially for girls and boys of color to relate to. I didn't have anything like this growing up, going to ballet school in Arizona. And what is your favorite ballet that you have ever performed in?
Yeah, it's a lot, you know, and I wish that I would have had more representation that was really available and accessible. You know, it's not that it's not out there. There are so many dancers of color that have done so many incredible things and that have paved the way for me to be here. But, you know, for me, like the reach that I have, again, like I want to be able to utilize that the best that I can and show representation. But besides Romeo and Juliet, I would say Manon is also another one that's really kind of deep and meaty with the acting, which I'm really into at this point. I could definitely pass on 32 Fouettes and do a whole dramatic 3 hours instead at 38 years old.
So the 32 Fouettes in Swan Lake, Odile, right? I remember there was a time when I think it maybe have been in the documentary about you, where you were focusing on how difficult that was and how you sort of put a lot of pressure on yourself to complete them. And when you couldn't, you felt so terrible. But on the other hand, there was this idea that, why is it so strict? Why do we have such strict rules in classical ballet? What are your thoughts about that whole experience with the Fouettes and with Swan Lake?
I think with most things, in time, we kind of lose sight of intent. And I think that's happened with ballet. And I know that, even when I was coming up, I remember like older generations, complaining about dancers, with their hips up and their legs too high, and where is the focus? And I think that, at some point we do have to go back to the kind of like base of it all. And that is to tell a story through movement. And I think that's something that we forget, when it gets too caught up in these technical feats. but you know, we train and we work in the ballet technique in order to achieve those feats. But you know, I can't remember who it was that was explaining this to me. But what are the 32 fouettes? What do they mean? They're a way of causing this whirlwind of emotion, so that you know, the prince is so overwhelmed that he can't even see and recognize that the black swan is not the white swan. So it literally, like, whatever that is, and you know, the original choreography, I believe, was incredibly fast piqué turns in a manège, because the point of it is to create that illusion. And we often get so caught up in one dancer doing something incredibly and then comparing it over generations of you know, what other dancers should have to do.
Do you like doing Swan Lake?
I go in and out of liking it. But, you know, I think that when I approach, you know, I feel like the very first time that I did it, which was in Australia, it was the most unbelievable experience. And I did the 32 fouettes. And then, you know, when something can get in your head, like someone, you know, not liking how you do something, or not thinking it's as good as another dancer. And I'm rarely affected by these things, but you know, it was such a critical time in my career when I still hadn't been promoted, and all the talk and everything, no matter what I was performing, was whether or not, you know, if I failed at this performance, would I be promoted, and what it meant for me to be the first Black woman. It's a lot of pressure, which I'd never witnessed and experienced, even though there were a lot of pressures around me before that. And so I feel like because it all happened around my first times of doing Swan Lake, it's created a lot of trauma for me in that role. But the older I get and the more mature and the more I realize and have to remind myself of what I tell other people, which is, why am I doing this? Because I love it, because I want to share, you know, this story with people and tell a story. And when I go to that place, I can enjoy it.
You know, we were so looking forward to, I'm sure so many of us were so looking forward to seeing you do Romeo and Juliet this past spring. I think you were going to perform with Calvin Royal.
Yes.
Who has just been made a principal. And I mean, can you talk a little bit about that? First of all, his achievement, and also that partnership.
Yes.
It seems very exciting.
It's incredible to, you know, I'm approaching my 20th season with American Ballet Theatre, and I've witnessed so many incredible dancers' journey, but to see so many Black dancers, you know, that I've witnessed their entire careers. You know, I think back to when I was the only Black woman in the company for the first decade of my career. And, you know, to have witnessed Erica Lull and Courtney Levine, you know, Gabe Scher, Calvin Royale, there's Jose Sebastian, to be surrounded now, it's an unbelievable feeling. But I've watched Calvin, his journey since he was in the school, I believe, and in the studio company. And just, you know, it's not even about the color of his skin in terms of like wanting to dance with him. I mean, clearly that's a huge impact to see two Black dancers together, but he is so gifted. And I think he is such an ideal Romeo. And so many Black men are often typecast and told they can only be this over-sexualized, aggressive villain. So I just, you know, when Kevin came to me with the idea, he was like, would you be okay with dancing with Calvin and Romeo and Juliet? And I was like, what? Yes! You know, but, you know, unfortunately, we never even got to get a chance to go in the studio and start working on it. But I know it will happen. That's definitely a role, as Alessandri has set the standard, that hopefully I'll be able to do for a long time.
That'd be amazing. So before we go back to the chat, I do want to ask you, because we're sort of touching upon it, but you've talked about sort of changes that need to happen in the ballet world, social changes that are a long time coming. And it may be, with all the social unrest that's been going on, that maybe that will have a positive impact on the dance world. So can you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Yeah, it's something that, I mean, clearly I've been speaking about and fighting for my entire career. And I feel like this moment, being, you know, with COVID-19 and being in quarantine and with Black Lives Matter, it's really been an opportunity for the ballet world to kind of step back and see our shortcomings and how far that we, you know, we have to go in including more people and how it's going to help the dance world. I feel like that's what people don't see. They're either naive to it or against being inclusive, or just don't really see that when you invest and nurture in people and a community and an idea, that it creates an even stronger and better result and outcome. So, you know, it is important to see Black dancers on stage, and it will be so powerful when Calvin and I have that opportunity to see Black love represented in a way that is not about the color of your skin, but it's about human exchange, which Black people aren't often given that opportunity in that way, as two Black people. But I feel like this is a moment where, you know, I've been speaking about this for 20 years, and I think now is time for other dancers of color and Black dancers to have that platform now, and for them to feel that they're not going to experience any backlash by speaking about their experiences and racism, and it will only help us to learn and grow.
Okay, let's see what Emily asks, why did you want to start ballet, and what advice would you give to a young dancer? And I will add just to that, what's the best advice that you got when you were young?
Well, I wouldn't, I mean, I feel like I was kind of pulled into ballet. I didn't know anything about it. And so, but once I was in the ballet studio, what drew me to want to do it was this confidence it gave me. It gave me an inner strength. So many things I just had never experienced up until that point. And I just fell in love with this little world that was created that to me was so beautiful, especially compared to the world I was experiencing as a young person outside of ballet. It to me is one of just like the purest forms of expression that involves every single part of you. And I feel like as a viewer, you get to enjoy and experience that same thing by witnessing it. But as a young person, I mean, I feel like what I've received as advice and give as advice is probably similar or the same. But it's often just been about, you know, not comparing yourself to other people, owning and embracing who you are as an individual. And then the words of Susan Jaffe that have really helped me to get through some difficult times as an adult and as a professional, is not to let other people's words define me.
Do you feel like you did let that happen in the beginning? And
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that people even realize, especially people that you want to trust or you think you do, or even just kind of getting caught up in the moment, that people's words are powerful. And you can so easily get sucked in, and it's like you have to remember, first of all, like, do I know this person? Do I trust this person? Do they care about me? Do they love me? So do their words really matter? And should I give them that much power and weight? So there, you know, there's a lot of that. I think as an adult, you just have more of an understanding and capability of being able to sift through those things.
Right. Okay, we've got a bunch more here. Okay, Marina wants to know what was the most I think they may know this, but what was the most difficult role you've ever danced and why?
Well, there's a couple of them. I would say the hardest just in the ballerina's repertoire would probably be Swan Lake, but there are ways of when you do a role again and again, most of them, and you have that experience, you find ways pacing yourself. You know, where you learn kind of where you can use less energy and things like that, which just make it more enjoyable. But then there are other rules that no matter how many times you do it, there's no way to beat that physicality that may just be like consistent throughout for a long period of time. So Firebird. Firebird is probably physically, it's so athletic. And this is Alexei Ratmansky's Firebird that he created on me, Natalia Osipova, and Isabella Boylston.
The trio there.
I mean, it doesn't matter how many times I've done it. There are just some parts that are just, again, so athletic that you just have to be in really good shape, and they're still hard.
Actually, wasn't Firebird the performance where you suffered a terrible injury that really, really endangered your career? And I think maybe people would love to sort of hear how you worked through that a little bit, because it sounds like that was a tough episode.
Ugh, it was. You know, it was such a critical time in my career. I was 29 years old and really given my first ever leading role in a full-length classical ballet, the Firebird. And so I knew that it was a rare opportunity, and had I not been given that opportunity at that point, I knew I wouldn't get it again, because again, 29 is very late to get that first chance. So, you know, we were working during an off season, the three of us ballerinas working with Alexei Ratmansky. So we didn't get our full, you know, downtime to really recover from the last season. And I just kind of worked myself into the ground, and I wasn't resting enough and just taking care of my body in the way that that you need to. You know, the training, you know, rest is equally as important or more than the training that we put into what we do. So I ended up dancing with what I found out later to be 6 stress fractures for months. I remember going on tour and performing the Firebird in California the very first time, and I was in pretty bad pain at that point. And then we went into the Met season, and I think I danced for maybe 4 or 5 weeks of the Met season, doing everything from Gamzati to, I mean, I did so many big roles. By the time we got to Firebird, I could barely stand without being in pain. But the reason that I pushed through was because it was the first time that a Black woman was being put in the first lead in a classical work in American Ballet Theatre in the Metropolitan Opera House. And me and my manager had done so much work to bring in the Black community and make them feel that this was their time and their moment, and that they belong in that space. And so for that one performance I did of the Firebird at the Met, it was full of Black and brown people, all ages. And it was really the start of, you know, the audiences that we see now. But after that performance, I ended up pulling out of the season and having surgery. And I now have a plate in my tibia where the fractures were. And, you know, it's difficult to have a foreign object in your body. It's never going to be the same. So it's something I still deal with.
So there was a question here about, it said you've achieved so much in dance and other fields. What are your dance goals now? And maybe at the same time, you could sort of address the ways in which you're sort of broadening your scope as you move on in your career.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like where I see my ballet career in particular going is that I want to be able to grow as an artist. I think most artists feel that way. Like they get to a certain point, and yes, it's an incredible experience to do roles again and again and learn how to approach them in different ways. And you still continue to learn, but I feel like I want to have new adventures. So whether that's with working, you know, personally and privately with choreographers and having them create works for me. Like that's kind of where I see my career at this point. But outside of ballet, which everything is connected to ballet in some way, but you know, I'm going to continue to write books. You know, before Bunheads even came out, I was already getting sent, you know, edits to do for the next book. So I'm like, can we let this one come out first? But it's all such incredible opportunities. You know, I have a production company with a friend of mine who is a former ballerina and then went into production and producing on television. But I'm working on so many incredible projects, both in television, scripted and unscripted, and film, and being behind the camera and the scenes is such a unique and new experience that will only make me a better artist.
You know, it's funny because I was reading some history of dance, and it seemed like it used to be like age, you got to be 40 as a ballerina, and that was it.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like 50 is the new 40. So I'm sure, I mean, the question is not when do you want to stop? I think the question is more, how do you want to sort of, you know, enrich, you know, keep on enriching your experience as a dancer. And I know that you were asked recently, I heard you asked whether you could perform other types of dance, not just ballet. You said you were terrible at other kinds of dance, but it does not sound very convincing. You know, have you thought of dancing, maybe doing some more really modern dance? That kind of
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I've been talking to Akram Khan for a couple of years now, and he's an unbelievable choreographer. He did Giselle on oh my God, like national. Why can't I think of their name right now? In London. English National Ballet. But I am very open. I don't know. It's hard to predict. I don't know that I see myself completely like taking off my pointe shoes and just becoming a modern dancer, but I love that, you know, maybe a slower transition or just seeing where things take me. You know, I have a film that I actually, we haven't filmed it yet. We started kind of like a little preview. It's a silent art activism film that I'm actually in, which is rare. I'm not in a lot of the projects I'm working on with my production company, but where I kind of team up with a turf dancer from Oakland, California, working together and really just kind of experimenting and expressing, you know, different forms coming together. So we'll see.
Well, I know that we're running out of time, but I see a lovely question here. My name is Layla. I'm 12 years old and biracial. What do you say to people who questioned your ability to perform because you're African American?
It's so difficult, especially when you're younger. And I think that, you know, it really took me having a support system around me to remind me of what we know is not true. Every human being is capable of being trained, and if you're given a fair opportunity, we are all capable of expressing ourselves, and not one color or community can just do ballet, and there are so many dancers that are proof of that. And you know, I think that it's just important that you have people around you that are going to remind you of what you're capable of and your worth, and that you can be a ballerina.
And I see one here that is, it says, do you ever experience stage fright? I bet the answer is yes.
You know, it's rare. I've always been more comfortable on stage than anywhere else in life. You know, it was a place that, again, you know, with the background and upbringing that I had, it was a place where I felt so protected and so safe. Not being able to see the faces in the audience, and knowing that, I mean, technically no one could, you know, scream at me from the audience other than saying bravo or brava, and no one could come and touch me. And there was something that was so beautiful and just safe about that, knowing that I could freely express myself in the way that I needed to. And it was just for people to be able to enjoy. So, you know, of course, there are times when I get like a little anxious, and it usually comes from like the anticipation of waiting, you know, I'm like, can we just start already? But once I get on stage, I feel like I just get lost in it all.
All right, let's try to get one more of these in here because there's so many. Oh my goodness. What is your favorite TikTok quarantine dance challenge? And will you host online ballet classes for us at home while we are sheltered in place? And this is from Bryn and Bryce Richardson, ages 8 and 6.
I mean, I am going to sound so old, but I couldn't even name one TikTok dance challenge. I feel so bad. I know there's one that I remember seeing people do so much, but like I've never learned one. I feel like it's just, I missed the boat on that. But what I can say is that it's so empowering and it's so beautiful that, you know, I've said this a lot, but when I think about the times, you know, like we're in, that people turn to art, and they, even if they don't want to acknowledge or aren't consciously doing it, look how TikTok has blown up in this time. People want to move their bodies. They want to find a beautiful escape. They've, you know, with art, you feel grounded, you feel like you are centered, you feel like you can heal. It's a language of love and connection. And I think that's the positivity I see in TikTok in this moment.
Well, we have a question here, and I think this probably will be the last one from the chat, but it seems like a very apt question to end on, which is, will the arts survive?
Oh, of course. I can't, you know, I think artists are some of the most resilient and strong people that so easily adapt and adjust to so many different circumstances they're thrown into. You know, I think that we just have to really take this time to look at ourselves and see how we can be better and how we can learn from this moment. You know, having these opportunities to have a real virtual presence in the dance community is going to reach so many more people than you would be able to with any theater I can think of in the world. This is our time to, you know, really take the reins and make some real changes, but we will make it.
Thank you so much. I think we're being...
Are we being kicked off? The curtain's being drawn.
Keep going. It's been such a great conversation and so many interesting questions. Thank you, but our time is winding down. Thank you, Misty and Jocelyn, for joining us tonight. Thanks everyone in the audience for coming on. Don't forget, you can click on the link to purchase a book. Please check out our other upcoming events like these on our Politics and Prose website. And you can follow the Children and Teens Department on social media. Our handle is @KidsInProse. And I think that's it. We're gonna say goodnight. Stay safe, everyone. Keep reading, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jocelyn. You're wonderful. Thank you so much for having me, Margaret. Thank you.
Bye-bye.